On September 26, 2010, Frank Jacob York, Ty Michael Hill, Cody Miller, and Jason Greenwell, they all tortured, kidnapped, and murdered Dystiny Myers, a 15-year-old runaway girl. They bound her in Rhonda Wisto's trailer in California. They put her in a bag while she was still alive. They drove to Santa Margarita, where they burned her body in a pit. Dystiny suffocated after one of the men shoved a glove down her throat. Now, the ringleader in this gang of morons was Rhonda Wisto. She is Frank York's mother. She planned the crimes with Ty Hill. Rhonda provided materials to dispose of Dystiny's body and acted as a lookout while the men tortured Dystiny. Rhonda lived with Frank in their trailer in San Luis Obispo. They sold drugs and engaged in other crimes. Hill, Miller, and Greenwell eventually moved into the trailer. Dystiny herself ran away from home, and Hill met her in Santa Maria and brought her to Rhonda's trailer. They all used methamphetamine. Dystiny, however, eventually wanted to leave. I don't blame the poor girl. And according to all four participants, Dystiny behaved badly in the trailer. You see, Rhonda was upset because Dystiny stole makeup and compact discs from her and carved initials in a desk that belonged to Rhonda's mother. Rhonda thought Dystiny talked too much and she was disrespectful. Now, 1 or 2 days before the murder, Greenwell heard Rhonda and Hill talk about disposing of a body. Hill made a list of things they would need and Miller gave it to Rhonda. On the night of the murder, Hill said he needed something that burns real hot and real fast. Dystiny approached the group and said she was leaving. She and Hill went into Frank's bedroom. He then injected something into her leg and she became drowsy. Hill told everyone to put on dark clothes. Rhonda told Frank what to wear. Frank, Hill, Miller, and Greenwell went into Frank's room and quashed Dystiny with a baseball bat. They hogtied her with a duct tape and rope. Hill then used his bat on Dystiny 3 or 4 times. He used brass knuckles and the sheath of a sword. Frank did the same with his legs, and then they took her body. Frank later confessed that while Dystiny was on her knees, he also did other indecent things. During this incident, Dystiny was screaming very loud the whole time. Rhonda was not actually in the room while the men were with Dystiny. She came to the back door and warned them that someone was at the front door. Hill then put Dystiny into a bag and Greenwell carried her to the bed of Rhonda's truck. This is where Hill, Miller, and Greenwell loaded her into the bag. Rhonda collected shovels and told Greenwell where to find scrap lumber at the back of the property. She told everyone to empty their pockets and gave them a walkie-talkie. And then Frank, Hill, Miller, and Greenwell drove Dystiny to a remote place in Santa Margarita. This is where they dug a pit. Then, in a bizarre incident, Frank and Miller get into an argument and they start using bats. They got some bats, they got some shovels, they started to have a fight. What's going on, lads? Don't you have a body to bury? Muppets. Miller, however, was able to get up and he ran away. Frank chased him, but he couldn't catch him. The other two, Hill and Greenwell, put Dystiny's body and her belongings in the pit. They lit the body on fire and they left Miller behind. Eventually, when the body was found, the coroner testified that the cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation. The glove, the blunt force trauma, and the way she was tied, and methamphetamine toxicity combined, making it hard for her to breathe. When the firefighters responded to this fire, they found Miller. They found his head and his face were injured. Miller asked for help and said 5 people were involved in taking Dystiny's life, including Rhonda and Frank. The firefighters found the badly burned body of Dystiny in a shallow grave. She was found hogtied with her legs bound behind her, a glove stuffed in her mouth, and her eyes plucked out. What the fuck? Her eyes plucked out. Vicious. Her sweatpants tied around her throat and her hands duct taped across her chest. Miller told the sheriff's deputy that he, Frank, Hill, Greenwell, did Dystiny with a baseball bat in Rhonda's home. He said he was ordered to put her in a pickup truck and collect fuel and a shovel. He carried the body to a place where they dug the pit. He then felt something and he ran away. He said Rhonda was involved and is a fucking crazy bitch. And of course, he's lying. He didn't just feel something, he ran away. Miller omitted the part where him and Frank get into handbags. Now, later that morning, Hill and Greenwell were arrested in Rhonda's truck. Officers arrested Frank in the evening at his girlfriend's house, and they questioned him twice while he was in custody. Frank admitted that he participated in the death of Dystiny and rode in the truck of Santa Margarita and helped dig the pit for her body. He minimized his involvement, however, saying he was afraid of Hill and Hill told him what to do. While in jail, Rhonda herself spoke to her cellmate about the crimes. Frank, who was also in jail, wrote notes to other inmates about the crimes. This meant that in-custody informants testified at trial and they told everyone about these notes, as well as letters that both of them wrote to other inmates. You amateurs, you go to prison and you decide, you know what, why don't I tell everyone what happened? Whilst denying it at the same time. You see, in these letters, one of them, Frank said he was told to do this and everything was gonna be alright. Everything was gonna be okay. Frank claims in the letters he was told that Dystiny is disrespectful and she needs to learn a lesson. In her letters, Rhonda pointed out to her cellmate that she was the only participant. When Rhonda spoke to her inmates, she said, yeah, I was involved, but I wasn't in the bedroom. I wasn't in Frank's room when the incident took place. In the trial, Frank said that before Dystiny was duct taped, he asked Hill why they could not just drop her off in Santa Maria. Hill said, because somebody told me not to take her there and just to take her life and to get rid of her. Hill said that Rhonda did not want Dystiny around anymore. So can you see the dynamic here? Frank initially blames Hill. Hill, who is now blaming Rhonda, when in reality they are all to blame. Frank said Dystiny was disrespectful and that Hill was very concerned about her. Frank actually claimed he was not told anything except this needs to be done, again implicating Rhonda. And from what the police gathered, the entire reasoning for this whole incident is because Rhonda felt disrespected? Bro, what? Now, independent witnesses did place Rhonda at the trailer at the time of the crime, just before and after the men tortured Dystiny and carried her away in the truck. Greenwell, his testimony that Rhonda gathered a list of supplies for the crime is corroborated by a list found in a trash can near Rhonda's garage. The listed supplies were found in her truck smeared with Dystiny's blood. This was around Rhonda's home and in the pit with her burnt body. Miller's testimony that he was ordered to collect fuel and a shovel is corroborated by the same evidence. Greenwell's testimony that Rhonda warned them during the incident that someone was at the door is corroborated by a neighbor who testified she was the one that knocked on the door but nobody answered. Greenwell's testimony that Rhonda gave the participants a walkie-talkie was corroborated, as Hill said he used the walkie-talkie to make contact with everyone. Walkie-talkies, shovels, bats, handbags, all for what? These meth fuel addicts were just literally bored. There's no financial incentive. It's not like the victim did anything to hurt their honor or something. Have you heard of a more senseless, pointless crime? Police also found a bat full of blood. They also saw a table with carvings on them, which is the table that Dystiny wrote on, which pissed off Rhonda that started this chain of events. When the coroner went over the body again, he found a glove protruding from Dystiny's mouth. And when he went through the body and he saw the injuries, he did conclude that there was some form of shovel and other weapon used, mainly a bat. What Greenwell also told police is that after they finished the crime, they went to a restaurant, a Jack in the Box. They had some tacos. Now, when police searched that restaurant, they found a shirt with Frank's DNA found in the restaurant's dumpster. So, in the trial, according to the jury, Frank demonstrated intent to torture Dystiny. The jury could reasonably infer his purpose was to inflict extreme and prolonged pain for a sadistic purpose. As I said, there's literally no motive except, well, because I can. The prosecution believed Dystiny was already bound and drugged when Frank went after her legs. Greenwell confirmed Frank did this to her knees and shins. These moments were neither likely to kill nor render her unconscious. Therefore, they served no purpose except his own personal enjoyment. There was also substantial evidence of Rhonda's sadistic intent. She was motivated to inflict pain on Dystiny. She told her cellmate that Dystiny was a drug addict and a prostitute who had disrespected her by stealing from her and carving initials in her desk. She said Dystiny was out of control and deserved bad things to happen to her. Greenwell testified just before the men tortured Dystiny that Rhonda told him, "Some things just have to happen. You must do this." Now, before I tell you about the sentences, this is a case of a mother and a son committing murder. I'm about to tell you another story of a mother and son committing murder, so stay tuned for that one. Rhonda herself was sentenced to life. Her son Frank was also sentenced to life in prison. Ty Michael Hill was sentenced to life in prison. Cody Miller was given a life sentence but has since passed away. Jason Greenwell was sentenced to 15 years but has since been paroled. Now, what can you say? As I said earlier, they only did this because they could. I mean, I think the drugs, the meth, and their lifestyle had a big part to play in all of this. But all for what? All for what? A moment, second of like dopamine rush? I mean, if I said to you, hey, you're going to get a really, really good high if you commit this incident, but if you do it, you'll spend the rest of your life in jail. Are you going to do it? No. So if you did do it, then spending the rest of your life in a box is the least you deserve. When I read about this crime, honestly, I couldn't help but think, these fucking dickheads, bro. So now we move on to the case of Javier Wisto and Melanie Perez. Now, throughout his life, Javier was exposed to drugs, alcohol, firearms, and a series of men, including Valdez Lasso, who abused his mother, Melanie. You see, Javier took care and protected Melanie, as opposed to her caring for him. On July the 18th, 2017, in Massachusetts, a police officer made a grisly discovery of a human corpse that had been set afire and abandoned. Through fingerprint analysis, the police were able to identify the victim as Valdez. Prior to his death, Valdez lived with his girlfriend, that being Melanie, and he lived with Javier. On January the 10th, 2018, Javier was charged by indictment with murder and the use of a firearm. Melanie was also charged with failure to report a death and misprision of a felony. So the question remains, what happened? Well, in the trial, Melanie pled guilty and the state called 13 witnesses. Javier presented 2 witnesses himself and his grandmother, Martha. She is Melanie's mother. So in 2016, Valdez moved into the home. Valdez paid rent and had his own room in the house. He also used the room as a recording studio to help further his rap career. After several months of living in the home, Valdez began dating Melanie. So, on July the 17th, 2017, Valdez and Melanie left the house in Melanie's vehicle. Shortly thereafter, Melanie returned home and told Javier that Valdez had wrecked her car. Javier went outside and observed the damaged vehicle. Approximately 25 minutes later, Valdez returned home upset that Melanie had left him at the scene of the accident. Javier then heard Valdez and Melanie arguing for hours. At some point during this argument, Martha received a call from Melanie's phone, during which Martha heard Melanie crying and screaming and heard somebody else's screaming. Martha immediately went to the house. Where she entered the home, she heard screaming. She then rushed upstairs and was met by Melanie. Melanie was intoxicated and ran toward Martha exclaiming, "Mummy, mummy, mummy, he wrecked my car." Valdez then entered the hallway where Martha and Melanie were standing, and according to Martha, he went and grabbed Melanie. Martha observed that Valdez also appeared to be intoxicated, Javier, the son, attempted to separate Melanie and Valdez, and eventually Melanie left the home. Valdez followed Melanie out of the home, and Martha and Javier went after them. Melanie and Valdez enter a corner store that was located a few doors away, and then Melanie went home and locked the door. As she locked the door, Valdez is repeatedly banging on the door. Let me in, but Melanie did not open. Once she goes home, Valdez climbed up to the porch, pushed in the AC unit, and entered the home. Javier then went inside himself by climbing through the kitchen window. Javier told police once he was inside the home, he remained on the first floor, where he could hear Melanie and Valdez arguing upstairs. At some point during the argument, Javier heard a loud bang and rushed upstairs. He found Melanie on the floor in the corner room. Valdez had a gun in his hand. Javier observed the gun and went directly to him. He said that Valdez dropped the gun he was holding, and Javier removed both guns from the room, placing one under the mattress in a spare bedroom and placing the other under the couch cushions on the first floor. He said that he was seated on the first floor where he hid one of the guns. This is when he heard more loud screams. He then put the gun in his waistband and ran upstairs. Upon reaching the bedroom, Javier observed Valdez pulling Melanie up by the hair and assaulting her a few times in the body. Javier was attempting to move Valdez away from Melanie when Valdez spun around aggressively and rushed him. Javier said he then pulled out the gun and he shot Valdez. Valdez fell to the floor. Javier attempted to fire a second shot, but the gun did not fire. At this point, Javier is thinking Valdez is still a threat, so he got the other gun and he shot Valdez in the head. Now, before I continue with the story, what do you think should happen to Javier? He's trying to save his mom, clearly. Javier was looking after his mom, so I don't think there was malicious intent at this point. But that second gun, he shot him first, he tamed him. But then he went and got the gun and shot him in the head. What do you think his punishment should be? After the shooting, Melanie called her ex-boyfriend James Clark and asked him to help dispose of the body. Clark testified that Javier told him that he had taken the life of Valdez. Javier explained to Clark that he shot Valdez after Valdez had lunged at him. Melanie and Javier wrapped Valdez's body in sheets and loaded it into the trunk of Clark's car. Clark said he opened the trunk, they put the body in, and then grabbed a red gas can. Once all three were in the vehicle, Melanie instructed them to drive back. Melanie further directed Clark to a secluded area where he stopped the vehicle. The mother and son took the body out of the car, put it on the side of the road in the early morning hours. Melanie got back in the car, and then Javier lit that gas can on fire on the body. On their way back to Rhode Island, Melanie asked Clark to stop at a gas station. She bought cigarettes and a candy bar. Now, police did charge Clark for his role in the crime, but he made a deal saying, "I'll tell you everything so long as I can plead no contest." Clark said he left to run an errand and parked his car a few blocks away that night. He started to dial 911 but stopped. He looked for his probation officer's number but couldn't find it, essentially saying, "I wanted to call 911, but because I'm a fucking moron, I didn't." Now, Dr. Catherine Lindstrom was the medical examiner. She said that Valdez, the victim, an otherwise healthy man, died of multiple gunshot wounds. One of them pierced his heart and lung, and another that penetrated his brain around the time of death. His body too was covered in burn marks. Melanie's lawyer asked about the definition of homicide. He said even justifiable killings are considered homicide, insinuating, well, he went after Melanie and Melanie was just defending herself. In response to this, the medical examiner acknowledged that the victim could have continued to function, walk, and even try to fight after the first shot. She did confirm that Valdez had multiple drugs in his system at the time of death. Javier and Melanie, who sat side by side at trial, with Javier rapidly tapping his foot, they both pled not guilty initially. They argued that Valdez assaulted Melanie and that he was shot amid a struggle. The problem, of course, was the second shot. Did Javier need to do it? If Valdez was functional after this and he just needed medical treatment, why the second shot? And why are you going to go and burn the body? So, in terms of the verdict, Javier, who was 17 at the time, was sentenced to 24 years in prison plus a consecutive life term with the possibility of parole. Melanie was sentenced to 6 months. And in 2021, after appeal, the state upheld Javier's conviction. Now, of course, the second story is nowhere near as sinister as the first story, but you know the theme: mother and son doing dumb shit. In the first instance, with Rhonda and Frank, again, put them in jail, don't give them any daylight ever again. But as for these two, the mother spending 6 months, okay, she helped dispose of the body, and they did burn the body, but she actually didn't do anything regarding the murder itself. As for Javier, I do feel for him. He was protecting his mother, but that does not justify the second shot. He knew what he was doing. Food for thought. Comment. Tell me what you think.